Think if you're, 40 minutes into one of these shots and homeboy like burps or sneezes or something like that.
So he's wearing Nikes. He's wearing Nikes in the frame. We got to start all over. Reset the camera.
The buff and the blazer.
All right, welcome to the Buff and the Blazer podcast with Drew and El Toddo. Today we're going to talk about a little film called 1917, directed by Sam Mendes. Toddo, I want to know what your thoughts in general are about this movie when you walked out of that theater for the first time.
Well, I didn't really leave the theater for a good 15 minutes after the movie ended because I was so kind of captivated by it. But this movie had some legitimate hype going into it.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like it lived up to it for sure. And I was thoroughly impressed all the way around with the acting, the story, the cinematography, the time period, the geography, the accuracy of the historical aspects.
Yeah.
It was just awesome. I was completely blown away. I almost always get up and leave right when the credits roll. And this movie, I sat all the way until the credits were done, just kind of taking it all in. I've never done that before in a movie.
Sweet.
And by the time I turned around, I was the only person in the theater sitting there. It made quite the impression on me.
Well, I mean, I'm right with you there. I've never seen a war movie like this before. Like you said, there was so much hype about 1917. A lot of it having to do with how the film was shot, which is understandable. The movie, I don't know how the hell they shot this thing. It's bizarre. But on top of all the technical aspects of the film, one thing that I really liked is while it's set within the war period, the First World War, and it is technically a war film, you could almost not call it a war film. It's almost a character-driven drama set within a war backdrop. And I'll talk a little bit about that more as we go on. But I mean, it lived up to the hype for me. I was expecting a lot. It exceeded my expectations. For me, it's right up there with Saving Private Ryan and Dunkirk. Those are my two favorite war films. This one fits right in with those two. And it's quite different from those two. But a great execution of story. And probably the thing I liked most was how immersive the film was. You felt like you were right in there with the characters, following them on this 2-hour-long journey. And I thought it was just excellent directing by Sam Mendes and great cinematography by Roger Deakins.
You are part of the story when you watch this movie because of the way it's shot. I mean, the fact that it's shot all in basically one long, continuous shot with only one exception pops out in my head where the screen goes dark.
Or at the very least, 2 long takes.
Yeah. It is, you are just immersed. And there's not, like you said, for a war movie, there's not a ton of fighting in it.
There's not a whole lot of battle.
No. Even the crazy stuff you saw in the trailer, all that is completely complementary to the main story. It's not
right.
The fighting and the war is really not the main story at all in this.
Well, I was surprised about that because most of the battle scenes you see in the trailer, I think for the most part, those are the only battle scenes you see in the film.
Yeah, basically every straight war scene was in the trailer.
Right. And I mean, they could have gone that route. I mean, this film, set in World War I, there's so much you can tell visually in terms of battle scenes and going effects heavy and big sequences and stuff like that. And I'm really glad they didn't decide to go that way. Instead of what Mendes decided to do was kind of pull back and really focus the story on the 2 characters that you're following the whole time. And for me, that's why I think I was really sucked into the movie, because you're literally with the 2 main characters, well, mostly the 2 main characters for 2 hours. Because the camera does not leave their side. You're literally falling and walking with them. So for me, it played like an indie film almost, rather than a big studio film. But that's what the strength is of the one-shot approach. It's not a whole lot of films you get to spend that much screen time with the main characters. There's a lot of cutting, and you'll go to different, places within a movie or other characters. But the absolute strength of this one was how you were able to stay with the characters for the entire duration of the time. What did you think of, well, the two main characters to start off with? The ones that you're following. That's Lance Corporal Blake and Schofield.
Yeah, I really thought that Lance Corporal Blake was going to be the main character throughout the movie.
Right.
And that kind of changes.
Yeah.
But I was really intrigued by it because there's almost like this really heavy juxtaposition between the two main characters where Schofield doesn't really want to go on this kind of death mission that they've been sent on. And Blake is just gung-ho to do it because his brother is a part of this company that they needed to deliver this message to. And then when the shit hits the fan, Schofield doesn't miss a beat. He picks up that mantle and, delivers this message as if it was his brother at that company. And I thought that was a pretty interesting kind of misdirection by the storyline.
Actually, going back to that, what did you think of that being sort of the centerpiece of the movie? Really what drives the film is that they have to deliver this message.
I liked it because it's completely different from most war movies.
Right.
Like Dunkirk is about this massive event
Yeah.
that happens, and that movie did a cool job of kind of like spotlighting different experiences all wrapped up within this one event.
Right.
But this movie is much more micro. It's like a really micro story inside, at the time, the most devastating war the world had ever seen. And you're literally following two characters throughout the whole thing on what would be looked at in the grand scheme of things as like a very minor mission, right?
Yeah.
It's not like this epic, like a Dunkirk, like this epic evacuation, or like in Save It Private Ryan when they storm Normandy. I mean, those are
huge events,
major events in world history. And this movie isn't any of that at all.
Yeah.
I wasn't even really able to figure out, probably because I don't know enough of the history of World War I. I know quite a bit, but I wasn't able to figure out. I was expecting them to center this movie around one of the major crazy battles on the Western Front.
Right.
Like the Battle of the Marne or the Somme or something like that. But I didn't really get that in the movie. I think this was just basically one part on the Western Front lines.
Yeah.
Which stretched across Europe, essentially. And it's just a really micro story within a massive story.
Right.
And I appreciated that there wasn't a bunch of like nationalist rah-rah stuff in the movie. Like Dunkirk is all, Britain rah-rah kind of stuff. And there's almost none of that in this movie. Like, obviously, you know who the good guys and the bad guys are. You must be completely no knowledge of history to walk into this movie and know who's not the good and bad guys. But it wasn't drummed up. It didn't feel propaganda-y as many war movies do, especially modern war movies to me. But I really liked how it just kind of settled into this story. You're in it right away. Yeah. There's no backstory. There's no flashbacks. There's no building. It's just you're in it.
Right. For me, that was probably the most surprising thing, was how focused the story was and how focused the plot was. Like you said, those other films are they give you a macroscopic view of where they take place. So whether it be on Normandy Beach or, on the shores of Dunkirk, this one, I loved how the story was so focused and very simple. They have to get this message to one of the divisions because they're about to walk into a slaughter. And I felt like the simplicity of that allowed for them to capture the aspects of World War I without having to go into like these massive, huge set pieces of battle scenes and stuff like that. And that was something that was really refreshing for me. It's something you don't see every day. When you think of a war film, you're expecting to see, some awesome, huge action sequences. And that's not to say that the ones that were in the film weren't incredible. There's the scene at the end where he's on the front line running through mortar fire, and it's awesome. It's the scene you see in the trailer. But that was, I mean, those are just little garnishes in terms of the broader or more focused storyline. And I thought that was a real strength of the movie. Going back to Schofield though, because you mentioned like the Battle of the Somme and a couple other battles. Didn't he mention that he got a medal for the Somme, being at the Battle of the Somme or something like that?
I can't remember specifically, but yeah, he was involved in something big, and he traded his medal for like a bottle of wine or something
right.
like that.
Yeah.
Just that little anecdote right there, trading a medal for a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
Speaks to a really deep metaphor about war in general.
Right.
And I thought the movie did a fantastic job of kind of pointing out the fact that not really anybody wanted to be there.
Oh, yeah.
Like they knew what they had to do. It's not anything like wars that we have in modern times. This was like stopping of a full-blown invasion from the east of the Germans. And they just did a really good job of showing the horrors of war without showing in super intense battle scenes.
Oh, we'll talk about that. Don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely want to hit on that point. I want to get back to the two characters, though, Blake and Schofield. I loved the dichotomy of these two characters. So I love how Blake, he seems like he's maybe younger than Schofield, like he'd be someone younger. He seems a bit more naive than Schofield and a little more willing to go out and give his effort and do the right thing and get on this mission, especially because it involves his brother, because his brother's in the company that are the division that they're trying to save from going into the slaughter. And so when he chooses Schofield to go with him, you get the sense that he's willing to take the lead on it, and Schofield's just being dragged along. And he even says as much as they're on their walk that, he's like, why did you choose me to go on this thing? He's like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
And I loved how Blake, he seems more of like the caring personality in terms of his character development, and Schofield's the total prickly pear. Like he's he gives like an interesting contrast to Blake. And it's so ironic that Blake is the one, spoilers, that gets knifed and dies when he's actually trying to help out
a German pilot
that crashed.
Yeah.
That was really ironic and sad.
And the crazy part is you don't even see it happen.
No.
Yeah, Blake is played by Dean Charles Chapman.
Yeah.
And Schofield is played by George McKay.
George McKay.
And I just felt like you said, Blake is like the young, gung-ho, just got there, ready to do anything kind of guy. And Schofield is more of, he's been there maybe a few tours or something. He does mention at some point he got to go back, and then he got shipped back out, and he's seen it, and he doesn't want to cross no man's land. I mean, you think about a war like that, and if anybody who's interested in World War I but doesn't really have the time to read a bunch, you should go listen to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, Blueprint for Armageddon. It's probably one of the best pieces of audio media available on the planet. I think it's still available for free. It's not behind the paywall yet. And listening to that podcast and then seeing this movie really brought little details in that I wouldn't have noticed and I wouldn't have thought were a big a deal if I had just saw the movie and I didn't know certain things. And you can just tell that Schofield has seen that shit and he knows what's on the other side of that trench.
Mm-hmm.
And
is there anything specific that you can pick out from his podcast? Or
Oh yeah, I mean tons of it. Like all the bodies laying in the trenches and stuff, like that stuff will be shocking to you regardless of if you know the history. But the little things like the tripwires in the mines, or not mines, but like the tunnels.
I didn't know that was the thing.
Yeah, like the Germans falling back on purpose and setting all kinds of traps. And then there's a scene right when they get into the Germans' trenches that have been abandoned, when they walk past all the artillery.
Yeah.
And the size and the quantity of the artillery shells.
Right.
is something that they, even in the movie, they're just like, holy shit, like this is insane. And there's little things like that because World War One was like the first really true modern war.
Yeah.
And there was things that the Germans had on their side, guns and artillery, that have never been seen before. And listening to Blueprint for Armageddon and then seeing the movie, little things like that just really stuck out to me.
I want to go back to the no man's land part. So I was really, really happy that the way they chose to deal with no man's land was them going through a deserted no man's land. When in any other war film, you would have some full on like sequence through no man's land with machine gun fire and stuff. Watch Wonder Woman and you'll see something like
Some ridiculous, insurmountable task.
Right. The thing I liked about this sequence was how slow it was. The camera followed Blake and Schofield through the whole maze of no man's land. You really got to see just how ugly this war was. What it reminded me of were, like, a lot of times you see pictures of dead bodies and stuff from like the Civil War and those old black and white images. The stuff you see in that sequence reminded me of some of the images from that war. But it's gruesome. It really, like you said, another strength of the movie was how they really de-glamorize war, and they just really show you how nasty and awful this shit is. I think the sequence through No Man's Land is one of the main players in really just showing you how awful it is. And I mean, they're walking around, they go through barbed wire, you see bodies wrapped up in it, you see rats all over the place, the waters are just totally diseased. Is really, really difficult to watch. And they could have totally done some crazy action set piece and decided to do it that way and go through a deserted no man's land. And I thought that was just an amazing choice.
It was kind of very suspenseful, but nothing really super crazy happened to them. And I thought it did a really good job of just like capturing the tension that someone in that situation might be going through. Like the part where Schofield sticks his hand in the barbed wire and then wraps it up, and then they're scrambling through all the craters from all the artillery, and he straight sticks his bloody hand into a guy's body.
Yeah.
Like just little things like that.
That was gruesome.
Is just, it did a fantastic job of really capturing the meat grinder, as Dan Carlin would call it, of that war. And yeah, the No Man, I mean, those were probably, I don't know, there's so many awesome shots in the movie, and the way the camera follows them, it's not like you're behind them. It's not like you're in front of them. The camera's constantly moving around from different angles and circling them. It's just so cool. So well shot.
I want to go back to Schofield, though, for a second. So, at first, I wasn't really thinking that I was going to like Schofield's character. He's so kind of off-putting in the beginning and so prickly, and he's just not willing to really want to be there. And then after Blake dies, I feel like that's when he starts to develop as a character. So you see him, now that his friend's gone, he really wants to get this message delivered for his friend because that's what his friend wanted, and he wants to help out his brother. But on top of that, you get to see his little tendencies and his habits and how really, much of a decent human being he is. He gets in the truck with the other company that picks him up, and he's just so hyper focused on getting the message delivered. He jumps out, they get stuck in the mud, and he's having them, get out and literally have them push the truck out of the mud ditch. After struggling, they finally do it. And I think after that sequence, that's when he stumbles upon the sniper, right? In the town.
Yeah, well, they drop him off at the town. He has to
Right.
cross the bridge.
That's where the action starts to heat up a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, he gets shot at by a sniper, and that dude just full on busts through, the tower and walks up the stairs. Yeah, you wouldn't catch me dead doing that. And he totally goes up and opens the door on the sniper, and then he takes out the sniper from below. He kind of nicks him, but then that's when I think he gets shot, and then he falls down the steps. and that's when you get the fade to black.
Yeah, I don't know if he gets full blown shot, but maybe the shot glances off his helmet or something.
Yeah.
And he falls down and bashes his head.
Right.
But before that, like you were saying, the scene when Blake dies, up until then, Schofield is basically doesn't want to be there, and he's just along for the ride. And then when Blake dies, and by the way, the scene when he dies is extremely
let's
powerful.
talk about that real quick. Yeah,
Okay.
Because I know that was a really powerful scene.
Not just emotionally, but the way they did it, I don't know if it's CGI or whatever, how you can see the blood actually draining out of his body. Not just that you can see the stab wound on his chest. You can see his skin starting to gray and go pale. I was just blown away at how they did that. And the fact that it's tied with the first, 35 minutes of the movie or whatever.
Yeah,
It's just
he dies pretty
completely
quick.
It's just completely insane how they filmed that to me. Like, how many times do you think that it took to do that one specific thing? Like, do you think the graying of the skin is CGI thing?
That had to be post, I would think, but I don't know. I mean, there's magic in this movie in terms of how they made it. I wouldn't be surprised if they did something.
Yeah, and then right after that, you can see Schofield's kind of in shock for like the next 10 minutes or whatever.
Well, that death scene, though, is actually pretty long.
Oh, yeah. It's like, what, 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah, like it takes him a while to die, actually. And
Yeah.
that's what makes it even more painful, really, to watch. It's kind of drawn out. He doesn't just die.
Yeah.
He, like, fades away, and it's really sad.
Super sad. And then he gets, he's trying to, drag his buddy somewhere. I don't know if he's dragging him down to the river to bury him or whatever he's going to do. And then the other company shows up, and you can almost feel that Schofield is, he's extremely overcome with grief.
Yeah.
And while he's sitting in the back of that truck, you can almost like see the gears turning in his head, like he's gonna make this happen.
Yeah. That was the turning point for me with Schofield, is just how concerned he was about his friend's body there. Because after he dies and the company comes to get him and pick him up, he has a hard time turning away from his buddy that's lying there dead. You can tell he really wanted to bury his friend.
Yeah.
And just didn't have the time. And even as the truck's pulling away from the little barn there, he's still kind of just looking, watching the barn get smaller and smaller in the rear view. Yeah, that's where he started to turn for me as a character. You can see that he has this real caring humanity to him, which comes out even later on in the film. But going back to what I was saying, after the whole sniper sequence, and he gets deeper into the territory, closer to his destination, he gets into...
I forget the name of that little town.
I forget the town, but it's
they say it in the movie.
Yeah, it's bombed to shreds. I think it's at nighttime or early morning, and that's when he comes across the French girl and the little baby that's hiding out at the bottom of this, or the basement of this building, and they're hunkered down in there. This girl and this little baby, and at first you think that's the girl's baby, and it's not. It was a baby that was lying around that I guess that she found and ended up taking care of on her own in the bunker. And Schofield goes in there and he has this nice little interaction with them. It's kind of like he's hiding out too for a few minutes, but it's like he gets this sense of comfort and almost this, like, he gains a bit of his humanity back by seeing, someone else that's not in uniform, a woman and a little baby, and he goes up to the baby, and I think he's playing with it for a little while, and
he sings a little song for it.
Sings a little tune, and it's those little pieces of humanity that you see with his character that absolutely make you fall in love with him, like, throughout the second half of the film. And those were real strong points for me. And he ended up becoming, for me, the best part of the movie in terms of character. Like, I really liked Schofield's character.
Yeah, it's interesting because he's mobbing through this town that's not really crawling with German soldiers, but they're around.
Oh, yeah,
and
they
they're
were-
just kind of, there to pick off spies or scouts or whatever it may be. And just think about what kind of camera work it took. The scene where he busts into that little basement, he like kicks in this little side hatch
Yeah.
to the building, and the camera like crawls into the little side hatch with him. It's not even like, oh, the camera cuts and you see his ass coming down
Yeah.
from the inside. Like the cameraman did that with him. Like it's so crazy. And the girl the French girl, her name's Claire de Burke.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There might be some French pronunciation there that I don't get. But she did a great job, and it's just like this little glimmer of good in this completely war-torn world of death and horribleness and fire. Like the cathedral, the city is just burning, like raging, burning, like so loud. Did you notice how loud that part of it's right in that same kind of part of the movie when he comes up on the burning church?
Yeah.
And it is just like insanely loud. Like
It's literally hell.
yeah.
It's red. It's orange red. That whole sequence. You got the noises. There's people shooting at him. It's on fire. You're literally looking at hell. And I think that was a deliberate choice by the filmmakers to do that.
Do you think George McKay gets nominated? Did he get nominated for anything? I'd be pretty surprised if he didn't.
I would imagine that there'd be something in that for him. I mean, I thought it was great acting. The only reason why I'd say maybe not is because there's not a whole lot of dialogue in this movie.
No.
And people get really snobby about, you don't speak a whole lot of lines and it's all kind of visual acting. And to me, that's bullshit. I mean, they did such a great job, but there isn't a ton of dialogue in the film. That would be the only reason why I think maybe not.
Well, didn't Leo DiCaprio win for Revenant?
Yeah, and he didn't have any speaking lines.
He doesn't talk much in that movie. He just kind of screams and shit the whole time.
But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he got a nomination. I'm just saying.
He should.
Yeah, I think it's worthy. Totally.
He absolutely should. Because the camera's in his face the whole movie.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like a few times where he's not center screen.
And if you believe
the whole movie,
if you believe some of the stuff that's going around on how they did this, if this was all shot in one take, at the most 2 takes, you have to be on the entire time. You cannot screw up. Otherwise, you got to go back and reshoot. So just taking that at its word, that in itself, I think, is worthy of an Academy Award. Not a whole lot of actors have to act for 2 hours straight and be on for 2 hours.
Yeah. There's definitely a cut when he falls down the stairs from the sniper because the screen goes black for like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
There's definitely a cut when the explosion goes off in the tunnel from the rats. Because
right.
there's definitely a cut there. So that's at least 2.
Yeah, you can hide a cut right there. Mm-hmm.
There's at least 2. This must have been a stressful movie to film. Think if you're 40 minutes into one of these shots and homeboy like burps or sneezes or something like that.
So he's wearing Nikes. He's wearing Nikes in the frame. We got to start all over. Reset the camera.
But there's a Starbucks cup like that Game of Thrones shit.
Yeah. The infamous Starbucks cup. I'll tell you for sure who's going to get an Oscar for this film. It's Roger Deakins.
Who's that?
The cinematographer.
Okay.
I mean,
yeah.
Good Lord.
It's the best shot movie I've ever seen.
Yeah, it has to be one of the best I've seen.
Nothing comes really close. Revenant was shot really well, but there's a ton of CGI in that.
Yeah.
Like the whole bear scene is CGI, right? It's not a real bear. He's just like getting pulled around on strings, right?
Yeah.
And a movie that I actually didn't like at all in terms of the story, but was shot very similar to this, that Michael Keaton, Galifianakis, Birdman movie.
Yeah,
that was shot very similar to this. Like a one continuous type of thing.
Yeah, a lot of long takes in that.
But nothing this good.
No. And at first, when I heard they were shooting this or gonna try to shoot it in one shot, it sounded really cool to me. But then I started thinking, I'm like, that could get kind of boring if it's all in one shot and you're just following. And so the way he decided to shoot with the one take by moving the camera behind them and then moving in front and kind of circling around them, and then just being able to maneuver the camera and capture different things on the ground. And like you said, the scene where Schofield kicks open the door to get into that basement where the girl is with the baby.
Yeah.
They must have hired, a child and taught the child how to shoot it or something just to get through the door.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so baffling. Like, was the whole movie shot on the same one camera?
I'm not sure. I know it was shot digitally though, and with digital, you couldn't shoot a film like this on film, because I think film at the most maybe you have like 15 minutes worth of shooting, or 10 to 15 minutes
Without having to reload.
Right, you'd have to restock the film. So I know they shot digitally. I would love to see behind the set or behind the scenes footage of them doing these takes. I just don't know how they did it. I've never seen anything like it.
Like I said, it's the best shot movie I've ever seen.
Was there a favorite sequence in the film that you liked in terms of either how it was shot or just in general?
Yeah, the scene where he wakes up from getting knocked out and then he starts running through the town and he comes around the corner to see the burning church.
Yeah.
And then he turns another corner and the German soldier is across the courtyard and starts running at him and firing. That was probably my favorite individual scene in the movie.
Yeah.
It's just so eerie. And the German guy has the gas mask on and starts chasing him. And that's right before he busts into the little basement with the chick.
Right. Yeah.
That was probably my favorite single, 3-4 minutes of the movie, and how they're throwing up the giant flares.
Oh yeah, to find him,
and he knows to hide in the shadow. Like, oh, it's just so well done.
That was the most stressful part of the film for me, when he's trying to get out of that town.
Yeah, surprisingly, when the action was picked up, I wasn't as stressed out, or I guess suspenseful.
Yeah,
the part where they were going through no man's land, I kept expecting them to like turn a corner and there's a whole bunch of Germans sitting there, but it didn't ever happen. So it was kind of like this really heavy suspense with no payoff.
Yeah.
And like the scene when the plane crashes through the barn, like, do you think that's real or is that all CGI? Like, did they really crash? Because it's not a bad crash. Like, I saw it as like something a stunt pilot could totally pull off.
If this were any other film, I would say that's definitely CGI.
It didn't look like it. It totally looked real.
This movie screws with my expectations of how movies are made, so I couldn't tell you. That looked real as hell to me.
Yeah. All of it.
Yeah.
The whole movie looked really real. Even the corpses. They did a really good job of like showing, bodies in different stages of decay.
Yeah.
And like the part near the end when he's floating down the river, and he has to climb out, and there's all those bloated bodies stuck on the log, and he has to like climb over them to get out of the river. Like, yeah, it's just so heavy.
I mean, I've never been in a war. I hope I never have to see it, but I would imagine that this is pretty close to what they captured. I mean, if you want to see just how nasty this shit is, this is a good movie to get you thinking about how bad some of this stuff was. And
that gives you good perspective, you know what I mean? I mean, this was a little over a century ago, and the age we are, we'd have been there.
Yeah. We'd have
had to be on the Western Front somewhere. Because I think the Americans entered in 1917, entered the war.
Yeah.
Started, 1914, and ended early 18? Does that sound right?
Yeah, it sounds right, I think.
I think so. But yeah, the Americans came in, and there wasn't any Americans in this movie. It was just strictly the British part.
Yeah. But that is interesting how you compared it to Dunkirk, how Dunkirk was really, more of that oorah kind of go Britain kind of
Yeah.
story. And it makes sense because that was a proud moment for Britain with Dunkirk. I mean, they essentially got defeated and they were able to save all those guys. This is a different story.
Yeah, this is a totally different
Totally different
story.
story. But
This is a microscope, and Dunkirk is a
yeah,
a telescope
right.
kind of thing. Or is that's the wrong that's,
Yeah.
that's the wrong analogy.
A telescope? Close enough. We'll go with microscope. But one scene I do want to talk about is when he finally gets the message to was it a colonel, right?
I don't think he's a colonel.
Played by Benedict Cumberbatch.
Oh, I thought you were talking about a different scene.
Yeah, no. When he finally gets the message to, I think he's a colonel, if I remember.
I don't
correctly.
know my army
But yes,
hierarchy
so,
very well.
So he finally is able to get the message delivered, and there was a point there where I thought it was going to be all for nothing because he didn't seem like he was too keen on stopping the advance onto the battlefield.
Yeah,
even when he got
Cumberbatch was
there.
a dick.
Yeah, he's total like hard nosed, cold.
And he gets warned about that.
That's
The
right.
commander of the company that picks him up in the
That's right. He tells him
he
to
tells
have
him
a witness.
Yeah, like have a witness, some
Yeah.
men, something. I forget the line. It's a
Yeah.
good line.
Yeah.
All of the complimentary characters were fantastic in this movie.
Yeah.
And not a one of them has more than 10 lines. And these are like big hitters, right?
Yeah, Benedict Cumberbatch.
Cumberbatch,
Is it Colin Firth?
Colin Firth,
Those were the two most recognizable ones to me. And then there's just a
Mark
slew
Strong.
Mark Strong, that's right. A slew of just great English actors sprinkled throughout here.
Yeah, I absolutely loved Andrew Scott's character. I don't remember what the character's name was,
Uh-huh.
but he's in charge. He's not the commander because when they get to the front line, their commander's dead, or general or whatever the fuck
Yeah.
is dead, and this one guy has like been promoted, and he's the one who kind of briefs them about going over
Oh, right.
the
Through No
trench
Man's
and
Land.
through no man's land.
Yeah.
And he's really funny and really dark,
Yeah.
and really witty. He was
Yeah,
probably my favorite complimentary character. He was my favorite complimentary character in the whole thing.
Yeah, I can see that.
He just has this like fuck it attitude. We've been on the front line for weeks, just sitting here taking gunfight. Like,
Yeah.
I thought little things like that, seeing the faces of the guys going through the trenches.
Yeah.
Some guys are smoking a cigarette and eating something. Some guys are laying there in total shell shock. Like, did you catch that kind of stuff?
Yeah. And that's interesting you bring that up too, because if you think about it, that could be something that's really hard to capture. If doing all this in one shot and one take, you could easily miss that stuff and not get it in frame if you're focused on the two characters. And that's interesting you say that because you do get, while that you don't get a whole lot of dialogue and you don't get a whole lot of characters, front and center on screen, you do get little glimpses of just all the kinds of personalities you would expect to encounter.
Yeah.
In a war like that.
And the different levels which people are dealing with,
Oh, yeah.
because some people handle it, some people don't. And there's little things like that in this movie where I just thought the accuracy level is just insane. A lot of times when they're mobbing through the trenches,
Uh-huh.
the camera's behind them. So you don't have Schofield or Blake's face in frame. You can see their backs.
Yeah.
So I took those opportunities really just to scan the whole screen and look at everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And not one time did I see something like that I didn't buy into.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's the freaking one of the best movies, top to bottom, war movies for sure, that I've ever seen.
Yeah, whoever the set designer was for 1917 really did their homework. I feel like the way they loaded the frame with detail just all over the place, oh man, it was so well done.
They probably rebuilt this whole thing, right?
Probably, I would
those
think so.
those trenches are dug.
Yeah.
They're really walking through tunnels.
Like I'm sure
Like-
they took photographs and painstakingly went through detail after detail to do it. That's just the kind of quality I felt from this movie.
Well, and I bought into the mission that they were on in terms of the time frame and the geography of it. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Like they only have 6 miles to go.
Yeah.
That's because when they're in the beginning, after they get the mission, Schofield is like, dude, let's just wait till it's dark. We only have 6 miles. What's that going to take us? 3-4 hours?
Yeah.
And I totally bought into the distance
That's another good point,
that
too.
he traveled.
Yeah, I never thought
Because
of
I'm
that.
kind of like a weirdo with things like that, with like maps.
Yeah.
And, you know, if the sun's on this side in this frame and then the next frame they're going the same direction, but the sun's out, like I'll catch shit like that because I'm kind of like a psycho when it comes to directions and
Yeah.
geography. And I bought in the whole way. Even the part where he's asking the French girl, where is southeast? Like, where are the woods to the southeast of your town?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then the way he goes, based on the way he came, I was paying attention to that kind of stuff. Like the way
Yeah.
that he is taking turns as he's running to get out of the town.
Right.
Like I was paying attention and it seemed to be pretty damn accurate. Like it was really cool. It might not totally be. I might be completely just bought in because I like the movie so much.
Yeah.
But I do pay attention to things like that, and I was on board because the whole story takes place in a span of what, 12, 14 hours, maybe
Maybe, yeah, something like
something
that.
like that.
Yeah.
It's like early afternoon when they get the mission.
It's as close to real time as you can get.
That's interesting now to think about it because it feels very in line
Yeah.
because it's one shot,
Right.
but there's no way unless they get the order much later in the afternoon than I'm thinking. Like if they got the order at like 7 because
Yeah.
it's summertime, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically getting dark when he gets to the village.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it's possible.
And
I
if
mean,
that was a span of 2-3 miles
yeah.
walking,
Mm-hmm.
to do that in the span of time the movie took, like it's definitely faster.
Yeah.
But then there's a big block of time where he's knocked out. Like you don't really understand how long he's knocked out for, and I don't think he knows either because his watch is broken when
Right.
he wakes up. And by the time he leaves, it's like 6 a.m. By the time he gets out of the city or the town and jumps into the river, it's
Yeah.
like 6 a.m., right?
Well, at the very least, I mean, I never even thought of that, this whole thing, but at the very least, at least you can say that I never questioned the timing of it. It never felt like, oh, we just skipped a whole bunch of hours of the day to get to this one scene. It felt like it all kind of went together over the span of 2 hours of the movie.
Yeah, and that was another thing. The length wasn't ridiculous in an era where movie length is getting ridiculous.
Yeah, 2.5 hours sometimes.
This
2 hours,
was
45 minutes.
this was just like spot on 2 hours, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Just at 2 hours. So he finds Benedict Cumberbatch's character and convinces him, and he's convinced to call off the attack. I want to talk about the scene now where he gets into, when he's going through the medical tent. That was another part of that horrific imagery of war that I thought was so effective in 1917. You just see how torn up everyone is in that medical tent. There's people missing limbs, people bleeding out. It's really gruesome. And then to kind of give you a little bit of hope, he finds Blake's brother after he walks out of the tent. I love that scene so much.
It's really powerful.
It's powerful. There's a sense of mutual respect between the two characters, and you really just see how much Schofield respected Blake and, you know, was really, really close with Blake when he's telling his brother that Blake didn't make it. And you get this real sense of just respect and honor between Schofield and Blake's brother in that moment. I thought it was really, really nice.
Yeah. So Blake's brother, played by Richard Madden.
Who was in Game of Thrones? Robb Stark.
All right. Never seen it. But his scene at the end of the movie is extremely powerful because you can see him at first be excited that his brother's there and then immediately devastated that his brother died on the mission. And you can see him digest that and push it down and become an officer once again.
Right.
Pay his respects to Schofield for doing his thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then right back to business. And I thought that was like extremely powerful and
Right.
another really fantastic metaphor for the horrors of war.
Yeah.
You know, like this guy's kin he just found out his kin had passed,
Yeah.
and he's staring face to face with the guy who was there with him when he passed.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that scene was extremely powerful.
And I love the part too where Schofield's like, can I write your mother? Will you give me permission to write your mother?
Yeah.
I want to tell her that he wasn't alone
Yeah.
when he died.
Yeah, it's some heavy shit.
Yeah, I thought that was a really, really nice moment. And then from there, he walks over to a tree and just takes a little squat underneath the tree. The camera follows him, and you kind of see all the weight that all of those events have played on him. And he kind of is just able to sit there for a little bit and just be in that moment and kind of reflect on everything that happened to him. I loved how they ended it.
Yeah, it's kind of like a middle ground
Yeah.
ending,
Mm-hmm.
because even though they end it that way where the mission is completed and it's tragic, but it's not at the same time, because he did do what he needed to do even though Blake died on the way.
Yeah.
But the fact I thought the way they ended was very on point with the war's not over yet, and that's just a little glimpse.
Yeah, that's just one moment in a huge
That's
war.
one moment of millions of men on both sides going through some heavy shit.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's insanely powerful movie, man.
Yeah, totally. Real quick, I want to just briefly talk a little bit about score. I know it's not overtly, in your face in the movie, but it's there. And I thought that the little bits of score that you can hear really heighten that sense of suspense and
Tension.
imminent danger and tension in the film. And I thought it all worked really well. Everything, the cinematography, the story, the acting, the score, it all gave you this one coherent story. And yeah, I couldn't be happier with 1917. It was really, really well done.
Yeah. I don't remember specifically score in the movie, but I do
it's not
know
meant
it
to
was
stand
there and it was meant to enhance
right.
the experience, and it totally did that.
Yeah, sometimes the best scores are the ones you don't notice
Yeah.
because they just blend so well with the film. Overall, 1917 met and exceeded my expectations. It was extremely powerful. I thought it was really different for a movie in this genre. I liked that they didn't go with the massive set pieces and stayed focused on characters and a very focused story. I loved the cinematography and how intimate it felt, where you're literally on this journey with the characters for 2 hours. It really did a great job of conveying just how awful war is. And I hope that a lot of people get a chance to see this movie, because I think even in today's time, I think a film like this is more important than ever. We can't ever be desensitized to war. It's something that, something like this is a great reminder of just how nasty shit like that is to get into. And we need these things around to help us, remember that wars are things we don't want to get into ever. And I thought that this film, it was great in that it didn't do anything to glamorize war. It really brought it down to a realistic depiction of just how bad this shit is. And that was the major strength for me in this movie.
Yeah, and I hope absolutely that we don't ever see a major land war like that ever again. The war we might see is going to be worse in terms of destruction, but to think about the men that went through that and women that went through that on the other end of it is just like, yeah, we don't want that again. Especially one like that.
Yeah, no, that was...
And yeah, it just does a it just does such a good job of taking you to literally one of the smallest little portions of one of the biggest lines, the Western Front in world history in terms of distance. I think the Eastern Front was bigger in World War II, but that's another story.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll get another one coming out that we can talk about set in that time period.
Well, they did a Stalingrad movie, Enemy at the Gates,
Yeah.
with Jude Law and Ed Harris,
Uh-huh.
right? That's about Stalingrad. That's
Yeah,
Eastern
Enemy
Front,
at the
World War
Gates.
II.
Yep.
I don't remember much of that movie. Maybe I'll watch it again. But back to 1917. Overall, I had extremely high expectations. I expected the cinematography to be great. I didn't expect the story to be as great, because when I heard beforehand that it was like your brother's in this thing, I was like, oh, that's the same plot line as Saving Private Ryan. That's pretty fucking lame. But it wasn't really that.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of story. But overall, I was extremely impressed, and it met every expectation I have, and I was blown away by the movie.
Real quick before we go into our ratings here, off the top of your head, can you give me like your top 3 favorite war films?
Saving Private Ryan's great.
Mhm.
Dunkirk's really well done.
Yeah.
And I liked that movie because Tommy was in it from Peaky Blinders. But I kind of feel shortchanged on Dunkirk, and I feel like if I'd have seen it in the theater, it would be a lot higher in my rankings.
Okay.
But I would say if I had to rank
Yeah.
a top 3, it would be 1917, Saving Private Ryan,
Yeah.
and Apocalypse Now.
All right.
That's probably what it would be.
Well, it cracks both of our top 3 war films of all time.
All right, what's yours?
So mine would have to be Saving Private Ryan.
You like that more than 1917?
Yeah, there was something about that movie that stuck with me and still sticks with me to this day. And it's the way it's depicted, it's ultra realistic, I think. And it just sticks with you. And that's another good film to show you just how nasty all this shit is in war. And then for me, it's a toss-up between Dunkirk and 1917 in terms of my 2 and 3 spot.
Okay.
But they're both in the top 3 for me. Those are my 3 favorite films. This 1917 totally cracked my top 3, though. This has become one of my favorite war films.
I would have really liked someone at some point to do a really well done ancient warfare movie.
Oh, yeah.
But nobody's come close.
Yeah.
But back to Saving Private Ryan, that movie is closer to us in time.
Yeah.
And it hits home a lot more with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like my grandfather was on Normandy.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And he was there that day on D-Day. And my father and him had like a shitty relationship. Like my dad moved out when he was pretty young and didn't speak to his father for a long time.
Yeah.
And then when my dad saw Saving Private Ryan, like brought him to tears and like had some pretty deep emotional stuff. So I can see why you have Saving Private Ryan up there. And I like that movie a lot too. It's great.
Yeah.
The acting in it's great. There's a ton of awesome character development.
Mm-hmm.
Really good war scenes, really heavy war scenes. But I think the cinematography in 1917 was better.
Yeah. I mean, to me, this is the best shot war film I've ever seen.
Yeah. I'm really partial to these long shots. It's just really impressive to me.
Yeah, and I think so am I.
It's almost like a John Wick fight scene.
Yeah.
You know, that just keeps going and keeps going. I don't like a ton of editing.
Yeah, and it feels organic. I think that's another strength of the one shot, one take deal. For me, I think if it's still in your theater around wherever you are, go out and see it. It's worth seeing on the big screen. The visuals are stunning.
You have to see it on a big screen.
Yeah, and if you can catch it in IMAX, all the better. You know,
I'm pissed I didn't see it in IMAX.
Yeah, I didn't get the chance to see it in IMAX myself. But yeah. So my rating, I give this a 4.5 buckets of popcorn.
What I smoked when I went and saw this was some Berry White, which is like a cross of blueberry and white widow grown by my neighbor outside, and it was a little too heart ratey. So if I got to give a cheap recommendation, I recommend an indica because this movie's pretty damn suspenseful. You're not going to have any problem staying awake.
Woo.
But if I had to rate the movie, first of all, I absolutely love British actors. I feel like I always buy in way more when there's a British accent going on. I thought the acting was spectacular. Cinematography is the best movie I've ever seen. Story was great. Time period was great. Accuracy was through the fucking roof. I'm giving it 5 bong loads.
Whoa.
I'm pulling out the 5 bong loads.
Sweet.
On this.
We got our first 5 of the show.
Yeah. And I'm making a point to be fairly reserved with my ratings, but this movie gets a 5. It's on my top 5 movies of all time list.
Sweet.
So
right.
I freaking loved it. As soon as it's out, I'm probably going to watch it 10, 12 times once it's out on streaming. It was that good.
Man. Wow.
And I think homeboy Schofield should be getting some awards. I think this whole movie should be getting awards left and right. Out of all the big movies this year, like I liked Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but it can't even tie the shoes of this movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, this one I think is a lot deeper.
A lot deeper.
Well, you guys heard it here. Go check out 1917, directed by Sam Mendes. I think it's 2 hours well spent and highly recommended from El Toddo and myself. Thanks for sticking with us on The Buff and the Blazer. That's episode 4, and catch you guys next time.
Have a good one.